Alrighty, and I think we're back up and running. Been enjoying a nice, quiet, silent, very peaceful game drive, but now I'm afraid that you have to be subjected to my nattering, possibly from here on out, depending on the Wendy's condition. And I'm slowly meandering my way along Arathusa towards the Birmingham boys. They haven't been up to terribly much. It's boiling hot. And just for a quick run through, for the third time this afternoon, if I could say a very big and still genuine the third time round, very big thank you to Zoomy Jules, to Shamrock, to Dennis in Nova Scotia, as well as Bob in Iowa for sending through all of your updates as to what the wild dog got up to this afternoon while we were away from them, apparently being chased by waterbuck and elephant. I know that you would have seen me with the wild dogs very briefly and then leave. Tony, in answer to your question, there's a couple of reasons why we left. First of all, there's about 6 or 7 cars waiting to enter the sighting. They've all got tourists, and it's only fair that everybody gets an equal opportunity to spend some time with them. And of course, it's very important to the conservation and protection of an area like this that the guests have the most magical experience to keep them coming back time and time again and make this place a viable option as conservation based. That being said as well, unfortunately it is a 2-vehicle sighting. Usually we're allowed 3 safari vehicles with any animal at any sighting, but you can change that depending on the circumstances. In this case it was decided, because it's right in front of the Arathusa Lodge, that it would be switched to 2 vehicles at a time. Generally that rule is there for making sure that there's no undue pressure on the animal concerned. So for example, if we've got something like really young cubs at a den site, or just really young cubs in general, and in thick bush, then the station or the vehicle that is in charge of that sighting will determine how many vehicles can be there. In this case I left because there were other people now waiting. They'd been waiting for quite a long time to spend time with the wild dogs, and it was time for us. We'd had our turn. It was very unlucky that it coincided with signal issues, but we had our turn spent with them, and it was time for us to go. I will try and get us back there later in the afternoon. We'll wait and see if they start to wake up and get active as it gets a bit cooler, and then we'll head back across. So I have a favor to ask of all of you, although bear in mind that I can't necessarily rush off back there depending on how many vehicles there are, but keep your eye on the Arathusa Dam cam as well, and let's see if we spot when they start to look a bit restless and a bit like they might go for a bit of a walk, maybe even go and hunt things. But in the meantime, there's plenty else that Arathusa has to offer. There was a somewhat elusive elephant herd that came to drink while we were sitting with the wild dogs and then promptly vanished. So I'm keeping an eye out for them. I think they disappeared into the drainage line off to our left, just behind the lodge, and they might pop their noses out, so to speak, and come walk close to the airstrip. And in the meantime, I'm going to make my way across just to double check that those Birmingham boys are still where we left them this morning. Given the nature of the Birmingham boys and their habits, and we've got to know them fairly well over the last few weeks, I would say it's pretty safe to say they're going to be almost exactly where we left them. This little particular patch of Arathusa's roads always tends to get me confused. I've quite often nearly driven into the staff village as well as the areas for deliveries. I don't know, there's just something about it that somehow I miss the main road and end up on a random 2-track on the outskirts of the lodge, so I hope they don't take offense to my meanderings. Alright, sorry guys, bear with me one moment. If I can get a word in edgeways, I'm going to try and get that update again from the guys. how many vehicles on standby for that Madura Ingwe? Did I get it correct that it's on the western side of the airstrip? Copy that, thanks. If I could take a standby on that, what's the position of that sighting? Okay, copy that, thanks. I have a surprise up my sleeve, but I don't think I'm going to tell you what it is, unless of course you're a regular viewer, in which case you probably already know, because you heard me using the Shangon term. But I know Scott is up and running and he has a monitor lizard to show you, so let's head across to him.
Hello everyone, and take a closer look here. There's a wonderful rock monitor lizard crawling through the undergrowth, using its forked tongue to, in all likelihood, detect a potential meal. Isn't this wonderful? We so often see them hiding in cavities in trees, and all we see is their head poking out. And this is, I think, the first time that I've actually managed to show you this rock monitor lizard doing its business out and about. This individual's about 2 feet long, so quite a big lizard, but they get about twice to 3 times the size of this. They can be really, really huge depending on the area that they operate in or where you find them. I think this one may be a little bit nervous of our presence. That's why it's kind of seeking a refuge under this fallen down tree. But let's just wait a while and see what its next move is. They're experts in seeking out nests and eggs. That's the majority of their food comes from raiding those kinds of spots. And they're incredibly good climbers. Like I say, we often find them hiding in cavities and trees. That's where they often sleep out. So happy that you guys got off to a wonderful start this afternoon with that large pack of wild dogs. I've yet to see either of the packs. Oh no, I'm just told that you didn't get to see too much of the wild dogs. Apologies. The technical issues are plaguing us at the moment. Just going to see if we can reposition ever so slightly. It's going to be difficult to get another view of this monitor lizard. I would like to try and spend as much time with it as possible, because it's an animal that we so rarely encounter. Maybe there's a little spot that I can sneak through around the other side of these bushes here. Understandably, it's going to be a little bit nervous of us in this big vehicle, but I think we may be able to sneak you 1 or 2 more views. There it goes. Such a prehistoric looking animal. Well, a rare sighting of one of the reptiles we get in this area. There's so many more, but usually the reptiles tend to avoid us, including the snakes. We don't see nearly as many snakes as we would like to, but hey, who knows, maybe this afternoon will be our lucky afternoon. Speaking of luck, I'm hoping that we bump into Djuma, a young male leopard who was found late this morning at around 10 o'clock. And as soon as we got that report, we headed straight out into the area where he was seen. But he was lost moving through some thick bush, and we didn't manage to relocate on him. It's a very hot afternoon, so in all likelihood he is probably snoozing now and maybe thinking about getting up a little bit later on, which will make finding him a lot easier. I think Jamie and myself both drove past him this morning. I had his tracks heading towards the treehouse waterhole, where we had a quick look around but didn't come up with anything. But maybe VM's Eagle Eyes, who's on camera behind me this afternoon, will aid in the process of finding him. He very often finds leopards or their tracks. And it's been wonderful to see how all the cameramen have developed into fully fledged guides, knowing all the tricks of the trade. Thanks, Paul. Very happy to hear you enjoyed that rock monitor sighting, and you're right, they are quite relentless predators, and because they are often predating young or helpless animals like chicks or even eggs before they've hatched, they can cause a lot of trauma to the parents out here, mainly the birds. But the interesting thing is even small birds will ferociously attack and mob reptiles like that. Even squirrels and snakes will be bombarded as soon as the word has got out that there's a thief in the area. The birds will all chitter and chatter, calling in more birds. And it was this time last year that we actually got to see quite a brutal sighting of where the hunter became the hunted. And that was at the Djuma waterhole camera, where a young African rock python, it was probably only about this long, newly born, they born at around 45 centimeters, or hatch at around 45 centimeters. Anyway, this young African rock python obviously thought it was onto a great plan when it came across the weaver's nests at the Djuma waterhole, and it was probably slithering about trying to check the nests for any young chicks to feed on, but it was detected, and the weavers started obviously flying into it and trying to knock it out the tree, which they must have successfully done. But its tail, about an inch from the end of its tail, it got hooked on one of the hook thorns of the acacia tree, and it was dangling head down, and there was too much weight for it to pick itself back up onto one of the branches, so it couldn't get unhooked. And it was just a sitting target that the weavers relentlessly flew and pecking it on the head until eventually it died. So even for the predators out here, you do need to be cautious. I guess the same applies for lion and leopard when hunting dangerous animals like buffalo, or even zebra. I guess for a leopard, they can turn on their predators and teach them a lesson. So we are getting into the area where at any moment we could expect to see Kunyuma, this young male leopard, who, I stand to be corrected, but I think he's going to be turning about 3 years old in December, so just approaching 3. And again, this time last year we spent more time with any other leopards with him and his brother, called Quarantine. And it's quite nice that he was actually found in and around Treehouse Waterhole this morning, because that was one of his local hangouts where we saw him more than anywhere else. That was, of course, before he's decided to move off and start increasing his territory. Just driven past the water pump that you may have heard chugging away, that gets water up to our camp. from a borehole. Question through from Ruth in Northern Ireland. Good to have you on board, Ruth. And I haven't mentioned the differences between the rock monitor and the water monitor, and that's what Ruth would like to know. Basically, the rock monitor doesn't rely on water, so you often find it in dry, open, wooded areas, whereas water monitors are always found in and around water. In terms of appearance, the water monitor's head isn't as robust and as big as the rock monitor, and they tend to have brighter coloration. So the rock monitor's a little bit drab in color, lighter in color, whereas the water monitors, especially when they're young, have got beautiful yellow dots and markings on them. And if there was more water around at the moment, I think we would have a good chance of showing you the water monitors. There used to be quite a few slithering about at the Treehouse waterhole, although I did see a youngster at the Djuma waterhole not too long ago, I don't think. Well, this is going to be interesting for a lot of you. On our right, you will see a large tree that's been pushed over. And behind this tree is the den site where the clan of hyena used to spend a lot of time before their most recent den that was found up on Aubrey's Road by Jamie. And as I drive around this den, I'm sure a lot of you will remember it, but the elephants have been doing some serious deforestation at the moment. I guess even now that I've just crept a little bit into the gap, you may notice the familiar mound and burrows where we were lucky enough to watch this, the youngest of the hyena cubs. This was the first den he was seen at. He was just a little black ball of fur then. And I've just spotted an interesting bird slightly off to the right in the ground. I haven't shown you one of these for quite some time. You can actually hear it calling. Listen carefully. Are you talking to yourself, or do you have some friends here? Oh, look at that! That was awesome! Serious little stunt work there. Maybe he's looking for some friends. He's certainly trying to communicate with something or someone. And this is the crested francolin. I don't even know if I mentioned that to you. One of a few different francolins that we get in this area. And in the coming weeks and months we can expect to see some tiny little babies. And it is the season for babies to be made amongst not only the birds, but a lot of the mammals will be giving birth, the reptiles. It is the time to see the young and cute. Not too many yet though, which has just made me remember actually, we headed out a bit earlier on before we needed to go back and change antennas, which seems to have done the trick again. Well done to VM. He's not only become a fully fledged guide in terms of his knowledge, but he's also a technical wizard who helps us troubleshoot a lot of the problems we get along the way. And as we came out, sorry Vim, good idea. This is, I should show the other end of this tree. Oh, crazy. Well, There were one or two more, Franklin. You can see how they're sweating, or not, rather than sweating, panting on this very hot afternoon. And there was another one I saw briefly that it was communicating with, so it wasn't losing its mind. And big thanks to Gary, who enjoyed reminiscing about the story of the python seen at the Djuma Dam. I'm sure you guys can also remind us of a lot of sightings. So much happens here that it's hard to keep track of everything, Gary. But glad you enjoyed that, and we're going to send you off to Jamie for an update on what she's up to. I think she may have something exciting up her sleeve, and we're going to continue on, look for a bird's nest that we think we found earlier, and we'll be sure to call you if we find it.
While Scott looks for his bird nest, we have found yet another fairly flat predator, and this one sits right at the top of the food chain. As you can see, we are with some very flat Birmingham boys. All 5 of them are here, but at the moment we've only really got a clear view of 3. Looking very comfortable in the shade. Now, for those of you who wanted or missed the morning show and you want an update on what's been happening with the Salala Pride, I haven't heard about them since we last saw them on Voyatella at main access. Still missing that young male, and unfortunately it doesn't seem as though he survived the attack that happened a couple of days ago. Nobody actually witnessed it, so it remains unconfirmed, but I think it is, I've said this morning, I think that there's probably about a 10% chance that he, if that he's survived and is wandering around on his own somewhere. This is one of the younger males. You can see he's still got that mohawk. He's only just past that sub-adult stage. Oh! It has obviously been quite the exhausting day for them. Takes quite a lot out of you if you're a male lion lying in the shade all day. That being said, they do actually expend tremendous amounts of energy when they do actually do things. For example, rolling over, having a bit of a stretch, possibly exposing their bellies to the nice cool breeze. It's a good way of cooling down. Interesting discussion we had while I've been chatting a little bit about their somewhat lacking manes that are starting to only just really grow in. We spoke this morning about that amazing dewlap that male leopards have, and hold that in your minds for the rest of the afternoon, because there is a chance we might be seeing a nice comparison. It's interesting how male lions have evolved to have big fluffy manes to help protect them in fights with other males. Nice way of guarding against bites to some of the more crucial parts of the throat. Oh, so many yawns. And quite often with big cats, you'll see it with leopards and with lions, a yawn can actually precede getting up and moving slightly. Although in this case I think the yawn was just a yawn. Often if you watch them, if they start to yawn and then lick their feet as well, it seems to be preparation for the energy to lift themselves up and head off. Oh, another one. What are you thinking about, boy? Cleaning apparently is top of the list. Now, I was chatting about the fact that they don't look like they've expended a lot of energy, but it takes a tremendous amount out of them when they do go hunting, and these boys are renowned buffalo killers. And it also takes a lot of energy. They move a lot during the night, and when I say a lot, I'm talking anything from 5 to 10 to 20 kilometers in patrolling their territorial boundaries. It's something that these Birmingham boys will have to get to grips with now that they are maintaining a territory in this area. They're going to have to patrol it regularly, call regularly, and mark the various bushes. And once they have really truly established themselves as the dominant member or the dominant coalition over the prides in this area. And they will become, in return, the new protectors of this area. I love the way they hug themselves when they're sleeping like that. Just a quick cuddle. The Birminghams have become notorious in this region. They've also now gained the name of the Gowrie males because there are 5 of them and they're big boys. But of course, they still have a reputation to live up to, and that is the reputation set by the Mapocho males. Donna, I was never lucky enough to see the Mapochos in the flesh. I've heard a great deal about them. I heard a great deal about them at the time, that they were really dominant around this area. That was sort of 2008, around that area. I heard about them, I never saw them. I would have loved to have. I have heard from people who did see them that there was something haunting in their eyes and in their expressions. And probably one of the most surprising and most well-documented coalitions of all times, I suppose, just in terms of the fact that there were 6 of them, and they caused such a tremendous amount of upset in the area in the beginning before settling down to become the dominant pride members. And as far as I know, it was pretty much the first time a coalition of 6 had been really well documented and followed. They chatted a little bit about this morning, about the fact that because there were 6 of them, they ended up establishing an absolutely enormous territorial area. It was roughly half or even more of the area of the Sabi Sands, which is where we are now. And eventually that led to them splitting up as a coalition. Now, please bear with me one moment. I just want to hop on the Game Drive channel again and just see if I can double check on the position of another sighting I want to head to, just because we've been rather spoilt with the action that's happening on Arathusa at the moment. Our stations, what is the lineup for that Ingwe looking like? Yeah, standing by. Okay, copy that. If that's right, I'd like to take standby 1. I'm just with the Birmingham Ngalas on the other side at the moment. It's been an interesting time in the lives of the Birmingham boys, and I'm going to, at some point fairly soon, try and reposition so we can see the other 2. About 3 days ago, we had them sitting around Boyatella Dam. Scott found them just to the north of the dam, and they were with a female. And Laura Craft, you were wondering if we ever identified who it was, and unfortunately not. She disappeared off fairly quickly. We were sitting in the middle of quarantine. We just finished taking down a tent. Oh, you did actually get up. After all that, it took you a while, but all that yawning eventually led to movement. I'm impressed. Sorry, Laura, I'll be back with your question in one moment. What are you going to... I think he's just moving to a deeper patch of shade. Might even go across and join. It might show us where his buddy is. Nope, he's going to shift there. Found a nice patch of shade with a little bit more in the way of company. That female disappeared off across quarantine around 10:30, 11 o'clock that morning, and we never really had a good look at her. And we think that she is the one that wound up at Arathusa Dam that evening. I don't know if you were watching when we had shadow, and the viewers pointed out that they'd seen a female wandering across the dam on her own. I think because of the area she's moving around in, I'm trying to guess. I suspect it's either an Nkuhuma or a Styx. My inclination is to go with Styx female, just because she headed back towards the southern area of Arathusa. But that is guesswork. It is not confirmed. Oh, looking very sleepy. Another big yawn. And I really want this particular individual to have a look. If he could turn his head. I know that Ellen and many others are always on the lookout for Scrapper. I think this is him. He's also sometimes known as Tokolosh, which is also a very fitting name. And I chatted a lot about him this morning, about the fact that despite being probably one of the youngest members of this coalition, he is the one that has acted possibly with the most boldness. He was the male that carried the cub around, the Styx cub that they killed. He was the male that was ultimately left mating with the Nkuhuma lioness. And when we had those two lionesses on the buffalo kill for days, he was the male that led the charge and came running through the bushes to chase them away. And I believe that this is something similar to what was seen with the Mapojos when Mr. T and Kinky Tail eventually split away from that coalition. That Mr. T, despite being one of the youngest members, actually showed a great deal of aggression, and I think Scrapper's quite similar. I also had a chat with Scott a couple of days ago about the increase of testosterone levels. We're looking at him now, and he looks so peaceful and almost harmless with his mane that is not quite past the sub-adult stage. And he's called Scrapper for a reason. He had that big black eye. Oh, look at those teeth. Maybe not so harmless. And the reason why he's also sometimes known as Tokolosh, the mystical African being, a tiny man that wanders around and steals children from their beds in traditional folklore. And he's quite a scary character in local culture here. So Tokolosh, because of the personality that he has developed. He's sniffing something. He smelt something. Lifting his head into the wind. I'm going to try and reposition, get a slightly better view for everybody, as they have tucked themselves down in the guarri bushes. And whilst I do that, I'll keep an eye out for the other two, including the eldest member, whose name is slightly easier to understand. He's sometimes known as Blondie. When you see his very light blonde mane, that's quite easy to imagine where that particular name came from. Now I imagine that the rest of the coalition is going to get names as well as they gain notoriety. Sorry guys, bear with me one moment. Standing by. Copy, thanks very much. Confirm buff pan. Copy that, thank you. Change of plan. We'll be back with the Birminghams later. We've got another animal to go and see. And it's an animal that's fairly in demand, so we're going to go now. We're going to go quite quickly. He's so close. He's just on the other side of the airstrip, but we have to go all the way around. We saw all of those males yawning, and Leanne, you basically touched on what I said, that generally a yawn from a big cat means they're about to move. Larry, you thought maybe they were getting tired from all that yawning. And I think in this case they were yawning. Yes, it preceded a move, but it preceded a move into thicker shade. It wasn't anything more than that. They're not going to go hunting at this time of day. I'm going to do a little bit of a cheat here to avoid going all the way around. as I said this morning, you guys could just keep this a little bit secret. We won't tell anybody. Just a nice, convenient gap in the ditch. Alright, let's zoom around. We've got to take our turn with this particular animal while we can. Oh, I want to show you something quickly. On this little plane, or on the tires of this little plane, have a look at what they've packed around the wheels. Thanks, Jandre, that was very well done. Now this particular plane is obviously planning on spending the night on the airstrip, and the reason that there are thorn trees packed around it is for two creatures in particular. One is a hyena, the other is a lion. Both of those like to explore the rubber of the tires with their teeth, then resulting in flat tires when plane heads off to land, or to take off. So you can just imagine that doesn't go down too well. How's it? How are you?
How are you?
Good, good, thanks. Cheers, guys. So they pack thorn trees around them. Now, personally, I hope that that effort around those tires is sufficient to deter a determined hyena. As we know from experience, having chased the cubs away from our tires before at den sightings, they can be persistent when they want to be. Alright, it gets a bit bumpy here, but we're going to go fairly quickly so that we get to spend as much time with them as possible. Brilliant. Diane, I really thank you for your update. You did exactly as I asked. Apparently the wild dogs have left Arathusa, heading north-northwest away from the dam. Looks as though they're on the hunt. Diane, that's not where I'm heading. Unfortunately, there are still vehicles in that queue. I have a different surprise for you, and it's still special and something you're still going to enjoy. But it is not the wild dogs. We still have to wait for our turn. Since we did get the first sighting with them, we have to wait now to be right at the back of the queue. Lots of guesses coming through as to where we might be heading. Now, Cecilia, you guessed that it might be a cheetah. Raisa, you are hoping it is Mr. Anderson. I have a confession. It isn't a cheetah, but I don't know which leopard it is. I'm going to give it away. It is a leopard, but I don't know which one it is. Keep your eyes peeled because I also don't know exactly where it is. Oh, never mind. Yes, I do. It's right where the vehicle is. That's fairly easy to see. Alright, Genre is just going to give us a quick windscreen wipe, as it were. And he's right on the south of our boundary. We just need to make sure that we're nice and clean so you can all have a really nice look at the animal we're heading across to. Okay, let's figure out the best approach to the sighting. I have my suspicions as to who this might be, but I could be wrong. Standing by. Okay, perfect. Thank you. I'll head that way. I've been given easier directions into the sighting. Let's make sure I don't attack Jean-Ray with a tree again. I feel like twice in one drive is probably a little bit unfair. I'm already feeling substantial amounts of guilt for the first time. The wind has picked up once again. I keep hoping that it is blowing in some kind of stormy, rainy weather, and it just isn't happening. Find a good way into this particular sighting. Just passing Buffalo Pan, complete with, as they describe it, the tree house. Paul Rizzo wants it to be Mbula. And Chris Rogue, you mentioned that Nkoro had found Tingana. There's our great migration all of its own. A couple of wildebeest running across the plains. And Chris Rogue, you mentioned that Nkoro reported Tingana and shadow mating. Now I suspect it is Tingana, which means that shadow is not going to be far behind. Let's go and find our way in. Notice that every time I enter a sighting, regular viewers will know this, but regular viewers will know that I always shift into low range. Oh, what a beautiful image. In order to sort of lower the revs of the car, minimize the impact that we have on the animal. We don't go speeding into sightings, but I don't think we need to speed towards him because he is looking beautiful and relaxed, as always. It seems as though I know that face. That's Tingana. How wonderful in the sunset light. Very calmly sitting on a termite mound, possibly reveling in the fact that he has escaped the attentions of Shadow, wherever she may be. Now, I mentioned it this morning, but poor old Tingana has not had one break of longer than a couple of days in between pandering to the attentions of the ladies in this area. And yet he looks as beautiful as ever and as unflustered as ever. How are you? Good, thanks. Any sign of them are fuzzy? No, he managed to escape. Look at the size of him. I never ever fail to get taken aback every time I see Tingana at just the sheer bulk that he carries. Now, I said to you to think about the fact that lions have manes. Tingana happens to have a spectacular dewlap, that big flap of skin and muscle in the front of his neck, and it serves essentially the same purpose. It also means that a leopard like this could drag a giraffe carcass up into the tree if he wanted to. That's something easily twice his weight. probably even more. Imagine dragging something like that up into a tree, holding it in your teeth, and with only your claws to hold you up. And then just imagine the amount of strength that a cat like this shows. It seems as though there's something in the air at Arathusa, and I think it's probably the heat that's making everything feel just that little bit sleepy this afternoon. But we've certainly been spoilt. In an hour and a bit, we've seen wild dog, lion and leopard, all within a radius of probably not more than 1.5 kilometers of each other. So Chris Rogue, yes, I also got that update from Incoral about Tingana. I'm not sure where Shadow is. She's probably resting in the shade. This is something that we saw with Karula and Tingana a couple of days ago, that on these really hot days, particularly with full bellies, which I think that he has, although it's hard to tell clearly while he's lying down, but they'd seem to give the mating process a bit of a break in the heat of the day, and that makes sense. It's not worth expending all of that energy when it's the hottest time. Look at those beautiful eyes.
Obviously, very much.
He's popped his head up. I think that's because he's spotted the wildebeest at the back, but there's also a dwarf mongoose behind us that is at the moment unaware of his presence. I would think it is unlikely that Tingana is going to expend too much energy launching himself after what is essentially one bite for him, and of quite a smelly bite at that in terms of a dwarf mongoose. But you never know, sometimes that hunting instinct just kicks in. No, I think he's fairly settled. Shifting position. You can see how windy it is, that dust cloud's flying. Shame, man, it flies. Lynn, you've asked a question that I think all of us have been thinking about in our own minds. Now, he's been mating with Shadow, then Quatile, then Karula, then Shadow again, then Karula again, and now Shadow again. And they're still not pregnant. And to put it delicately, one has to wonder whether his production is quite up to such a rigorous schedule in terms of mating. In other words, is he still producing fertile sperm? Could it be him? Could he be the reason that the females are not falling pregnant? I think it is a combination of factors. I think that with Quatile, at least, her estrus was a false estrus, and I also personally think that Shadow's first estrus, or first or second estrus, would also have been false estrus. And then at this point, it could be that with the excessive mating that he's had to perform, it might be that he is not producing fertile sperm, but I think it's unlikely. I'd have to double check my research in terms of the success rate percentage of leopard mating in fertilization. He's still watching those wildebeest, if you're wondering why he's looking so alert. Now, it's mostly a coincidence that he's had to mate with 3 different females in this area now. I do think that the Anderson male needs to up his game a little bit and help a brother out, so to speak. But no, Donna, they don't all go into estrus at the same time. This is a coincidence, and I think it's a combination of Quatile losing her cubs, Shadow reaching a stage where she was ready to breed again, and then Karula, I think maybe getting slightly old and not as fertile as she used to be. And I think that's all coincided to the point where he's had to meet the demands of 3 different females fairly regularly It has made for some spectacular viewing for us, and we've learned a great deal about the mating behavior of leopards as we've been watching. He's also essentially the only big male capable of, or at least dominant in this area. One thing that did surprise me is that Karula didn't go looking for Mbula, but then again she may have, we just may not have been aware of it. And just looking at him now, you can hardly blame him or blame the ladies for wanting to choose him as their mating opportunity. He is such a handsome boy, and I know that many of you, Lynn and 30-Minute Fitness included, agree. He is definitely a good looking leopard, and that dewlap is very impressive. If I were a female leopard, he would certainly be one of the top of my list. Of course, they'll be out looking for multiple mating opportunities as a way of ensuring the survival of their cubs. But look at those eyes. How can you resist? I'm pretty sure it's my imagination, but he looks incredibly relieved to be free of his duties for now. He's sitting right on top of a termite mound, which is of course where you could expect to find the possibility of an aardvark burrow. And Donna Sudbury, apologies if I mangled the surname pronunciation there, but you were saying, are there no aardvark around? Donna raises an interesting point. Tingana is famed, apparently. I have yet to see him in action, but that's because I somehow managed to avoid seeing all aardvarks. But apparently Tingana has a reputation for being a very patient, very skilled aardvark hunter, sometimes lying in ambush to grab hold of it as it comes out of its burrow. I have yet to see this. And in a way, I think it would be quite devastating for my first aardvark sighting in my entire life to be in the clutches of Tingana. I've seen his tracks before, and those massive paws are almost the size, or leave prints that are almost the size of a lioness track. He is not a small cat by any means. So peaceful. His eyes, he still focuses every now and again on the wildebeest that were moving on the airstrip. They are very far away now, and I think that instinct runs strong in these cats, even though he looks fairly full. I wonder where his lady's hiding and how long he's going to escape her attentions. I bet she's somewhere in this drainage line in the shade. She's going to be looking for him. Bear with me one moment. I need to just have a sip of water. The combination of dust and wind is quite a potent one. Luckily that water is the temperature of tepid bath water, so making for a very refreshing drink. Theoretically the temperature is around 34 degrees. I don't believe that. I think it's hotter, or at least it was hotter earlier. Now for a leopard like Tingana, just to carry on the theme of the weather and the dryness that we've been experiencing, for a leopard like Tingana and for predators such as the wild dog and the lions, The dry season is going to hit the herbivores very hard. But for these predators, it's going to mean a windfall for them, because essentially the prey becomes concentrated all around the salt water sources in an area, and it means that they don't have to go searching nearly as far. It also means that a lot of the animals are a little bit weaker, a little bit slower, especially the old and the young. And it means that they're going to have plenty of access to prey over the next few months, depending on our rain and what comes our way.
Just on the right hand side.
Now both Donna and Raisa have, I wouldn't say caught me out, but they've certainly asked questions that I don't know the full explanation behind. Donna, you were wondering who Tingana's parents are, and I cannot tell you anything other than they were probably quite good looking leopards. Oh. Quite exhausted. Raisa, you've heard us refer to the fact that Tingana is 9 years old, and you were wondering whether or not, because we don't know exactly, or at least he was not known to this area. He came in, as males tend to do, as they disperse away from their natal areas. So how do we know he's 9 years old? Did anybody know him from a cub? Now, you raise a very good point. It's something that I accepted as a given when that information was shared to me by other guides in this area, and I probably should have questioned further. But very interesting. I'll do a little bit of digging and see what I can find out as to where Mr. Tingana came from. I do know that there was a bit of a clash of names in the beginning. There was another female leopard called Tingana in this area. And that resulted in certain confusion. As to where Tingana came from, my guess, given his size, is somewhere to the south of us, quite possibly around the rivers. The genetic line seems to push for bigger leopards in territories that are much more in contention in those areas.
I like the way they
But even then, he's still smaller than the Anderson male.
exist in the bush because energy push run very fast and very fast. Actually, it's not the most dominant leopard.
So in conclusion, both to Donna and Raisa, I don't know the answer. I'll do some digging. I will see what I can find out. It could be that nobody knew him as a cub, and he was only acquired his name when he started to be known to the Sabi Sands. I mentioned maybe a couple of days ago that the furthest record for the dispersal of a male leopard was from the center of Natal all the way to the Kruger Park, which is a distance of, I suppose, close to 600 kilometers. So he could have come essentially from almost anywhere, although it's more likely he's a Kruger leopard. I'll find out for you, or see if I can find out, and I'm sure that many of you have some of that information at your fingertips as well. So if you know anything more about Tingana's story, please let me know on #SafariLive on Twitter, or you can email through to questions@WildEarth.tv. And in the meantime, while we're sitting with a flat Tingana, I believe that Scott has some wonderful ellies to complete our fantastic afternoon's viewing. So let's head across to him for now. I will be back with you to continue our wonderful cat moments.
Well, isn't Jamie doing an incredible job this afternoon? Wild dog, lion and leopard. The good news is we found another animal that I'm not sure you've seen yet this afternoon, equally as wonderful. And we're just going to loop ahead of this herd quickly now, and we should have you some good visuals shortly. little bit tricky going in this thick bush, so I don't think we're going to loop ahead of them again. We've had no luck in our search for Djuma while you've been gone, a young male leopard. But the beauty about being on safari is you never know what you're going to bump into. And this breeding herd was moving through the exact area where he was last seen this morning. Look at how cute this is, a mother and what looks to be her young son, trying to snack on the same little bush there. Oh, it looks like he may give us a bit of attitude here. He's flaring out his ears temporarily, but now he's been distracted by another small little snack. Young elephants aren't nearly as efficient with their trunks as the adults are, although you did a great job there. Yes, you did. Aren't they such wonderful animals, the elephants? Such bizarre shapes, and also ridiculously sized. That cow will probably weigh around 4 tons. Thankfully now it's cooling down as the sun begins to set into a beautiful evening, and one last straggler there just slipping behind the vehicle. Let's see if we can't manage to get you ahead one more time before they drop down into a little riverbed. Who knows, maybe these elephants will help us to determine where exactly Djuma is with their incredible sense of smell. They could quite easily pick up a sense, and if they do, they will often actually charge after leopard and lion. Even though they aren't really predated on by these predators, they still don't really tolerate them. Quite quickly, so I think this is going to be as good as it gets. Here comes the youngster thinking about another little mock charge. It really is wonderful when they do get a bit ahead of themselves and come trundling up to the vehicles. There's another individual about to pop into your frame. And it's possibly an older sibling of the young calf, because it's also been spending, this teenager you could say has also been spending the majority of the time quite close to this big cow, so could well be 2 different generations there that we're looking at. Look at how wonderful this is. The big cow's eyelashes were being illuminated by the setting sun in the background there for a moment. She's got a lot of mud caked on her ears. That's probably from her last mud wallow. I'm not sure where she would have done that, as most of the water holes are drying up, so they're going to have to start really thinking about where they spend their time. Because water is going to play a very large role in where they do decide to search for food. Well, happy to hear that Gerda agrees that you guys are having a wonderful afternoon so far, with 4 members of the Magnificent 7 already seen. Who knows how many more you will see before the end of the safari. The only 3 you are missing are the cheetah, the rhino, and the buffalo. The rhino you will sadly not be seeing, as even though they occur here, we decide not to give away their locations in the remote chance that it could contribute to poachers gaining info. Anyway, Gerda, happy you enjoying it, but we're going to rush you back to Jamie. She's got limited time left with Tingana, and she